Wait a minute. We could leave the castle? Could we have done that the entire time? I just thought we were the castle. I could have just Bowmaster Prelude. You know, the bow is a weapon that gets underestimated a lot. Archers in games are often depicted as fragile backliners, but the stick and string was the strongest type of weapon for thousands of years. People think crossbows are objectively better, but bows often had more firepower. The big upside of the crossbow was that training was fast and cheap. Even when muskets came onto the field, reload time kept bows relatively competitive. We don't get a lot of games where an archer is the main character. This is mainly because that would change the expected genre. Swordplay is the standard. If we want to play an archer, some things have to shift around a bit. Bowmaster is a game based around that shift. We win by either capturing the flag or wiping out the enemy army. Hitting anything with the bow will grant some money. Hitting something sentient will grant some money and EXP. There are multiple ways to aim your bow. The developer intended way of pulling back the string and angling your shots, or the way that most of us actually played. Just point and click. It's way easier, and I'm pretty sure when I first played, I was not yet taught the concept of angles. You can leave the castle and see what your dude actually looks like. This makes it much easier for the enemies to kill you because we're no longer behind stone walls, but in some levels we get better vantage points out in the field. We get many fancy arrow types as we progress, from the classic fire and bombs to just straight up magic. Pretty much every special attack is stronger than the base one, which is why they all have cooldowns that feel 2 to 3 seconds longer than they need to be. Also, for a bunch of things, we don't seem to get any EXP or even gold. This mostly applies to things that you have to manually activate, like the flank arrow, or attacks that don't directly hit someone but has a shockwave. It seems progression is tied to directly hitting enemies and doesn't register if, say, one of the magic shots requires it to hit the ground before doing its thing. That might not have been intentional, but it gives the basic attack some leeway. We don't have mana or limited ammo, so the cooldown is the one thing that gatekeeps the power of the special attacks. The stock arrow is the only one we can spam. By the way, the lightning storm is a complete trap. It's a good addition to this game's intended fantasy of a magic archer, but it's also one of the most expensive attacks and has a long ass cooldown. The standard fire arrow can out DPS it in a lot of scenarios. At least the meteor actually hits a large area and levels up fast because of it. Individual arrow types have a separate leveling system. Bowmaster rank seems to give a slight damage buff to every attack. Bowmaster EXP is given on a per hit basis. The EXP given to each arrow type is based on how much raw damage was dealt, so particularly high damaging attacks can level up quite fast even with long cooldowns. Once you play a good chunk of levels, your arsenal ends up being rather impressive, and you're going to need that variety cause man, the best word to describe the later levels is tedium. Stronger enemies do come in as you progress. Air units and elemental soldiers start arriving. The flyers are harder to hit, and you have to consider the travel time of the arrow much more than before. Elemental soldiers are tanky as hell, and heavily resist everything except their specific elemental weakness. Red guys are weak to ice, and ice guys are weak to fire. At some point, the flyers start becoming tanky and elemental, which is like, holy crap. I just shot everything at them, and either one of them eventually worked or they got overwhelmed by numbers. Even with all of this, I gotta say, 30 levels is a bit too much. It takes a while for new enemies to show up, and it really is just the same thing over and over again, even with the new dudes. You could very feasibly get rid of half the levels and it would have felt a lot better to play. I don't even think you need to readjust the EXP or shop that much. A lot of them were maxed out long before the final boss. The final boss is pretty cool though. Maybe it's just because he's the one time where something significantly different happens, but it still works. When playing the later levels, you're going to want to win via flag capture. The Bowmaster himself can't grab the flag, so you'll be relying on your soldiers. The horsemen are the fastest movers, but it's like turtles competing against sloths. Otherwise, troops are very useful as distractions. They're weak as hell, but they can cause some chaos out there. Friendly fire is on and pretty well used as a mechanic. Some of the best moments in this game are when troops on both sides are randomly scattered about and you're just shooting into the crowd hoping to hit an enemy, but you've already made peace with the fact that blue on blue is likely going to happen. And now I know how the A10 feels. Chaotic battlefields are fun. Too bad these moments are kind of rare and you have to somewhat set them up. It's fairly easy to just go up to the enemy's castle, spawn camp the early waves, and wait for the horse that has clearly never won a race before to take the flag. It's only at some of the last levels where the chaos in the field can finally manifest itself. I would say Bowmaster Prelude is quite fun, but I would not recommend playing everything in one sitting. There's nothing connecting the levels, we just move from field to field. There's not much beyond gameplay. The background setting isn't notable, music is iconic to me but was made for a loop, and I think half the sound effects are mouth sounds. But that's fine, and again, still quite fun. When I first played this, I was too young to realize the prelude in the title made this game a prequel sequel, so it took me a little while to play Bowmaster, the first one that a lot less people played. You can see how this is a rough outline of what would eventually become Prelude, except it does have a few mechanics exclusive to itself. Troops aren't here, but we can add upgrades to the fortress. Catapults and archers are going to be field units in the future, but currently they're fused to the castle. For what it's worth, we're also fused to the castle. In fact, I think we're actually the castle this time. We have far fewer arrow types to choose from, but each type can be individually upgraded. You can give them more range, increase fire rate, shoot more arrows per shot, or the standard damage increase, etc, etc. Some of this was moved to the leveling system in Prelude, but a good chunk of it stayed in the first game. The best thing that never made its way into the next game was the fact that some of the attacks can interact with the environment, like we can burn houses or trees with fire. It's a small thing, but it adds more than you would think. EXP is now a currency that you use to buy upgrades, and for some reason you only get it if you land a headshot, which are a bit difficult here because point and click aiming isn't an option. You have to pull the string back and hope your muscles memorize the angles fast. Headshots exclusively granting EXP isn't the only slightly strange mechanic. Like, we lose if enough enemies go past us and drain our population to 0, but we also lose population if we accidentally shoot some arrows off screen to the left, which will happen if any guy gets past your castle. You end up killing more population than the enemy ever would. Every single attack also shares the exact same cooldown. If you use a bomb arrow, you can't default attack until the bomb reloads. Maybe it's just the sensibilities of the early 2000s. It feels a bit strange if you played Prelude first. As you can see, the interface is pretty rough. You aren't told anything, you just have to stare at the numbers until you figure it out. I still don't know what half of this even means. Terrain generation, like Prelude, seems mostly randomized, which means sometimes a hill can just block your entire castle. Don't worry about it though, the reset tower button can randomly move it, so maybe you can get a better angle. Yeah, this game has a lot of jank, but it's also clearly one dude's very first game. I don't even think he knew how to animate stuff. The guys here move via vibration. You can clearly see larger ambitions behind this project, some of which ended up in Bowmaster Prelude, but the majority of that ambition seems to have been put into Bowmaster Winterstorm. That's a lot of levels, that's a lot of skills and passives, that's 3 different characters, but the only major difference is appearance as they all play the same. The skill tree looks big, lots of tabs, but it really just combines the systems of the first 2 games. We have all the different arrows and troops from Prelude, but they each now maintain the individual upgrades from the first game. It makes it look bigger, but it's only a bit more stuff than what was previously here. Some of the stronger stuff is locked behind your character rank, and have other abilities as requirements. Locking abilities seems to be the only thing the character rank does. You don't get stronger, that's what the passives are for, and you buy those with gold. I think this is a kind of bad leveling system. It feels primarily like a system that limits you, rather than a system where you grow and get stronger. I mean, if you look at any RPG system uncharitably enough, all of them can be considered systems that limit you, but you really have to be annoyingly technical about it. It's all about presentation and perspective, and the way Winterstorm presents its systems, it just seems like a not very fun lock and key puzzle. The key in this sense is grinding. Combining gold and EXP into one currency where you buy all the skills is literally just a system from the first game, but I feel like it would work out very well here. The 60 levels just rotate between certain modes: defend house, defend village, defend fleeing villagers, boss fights, husband burner of kins, etc. But all of these end by us killing everyone, and each level just has more and more waves. By level 15 out of 60, it takes like half an hour for all the guys to spawn, let alone the time it takes for us to kill them, and it gets longer from there. The levels just drag on and on. You can't capture a flag to end it early. Killing a wave of guys fast doesn't make the later waves spawn any earlier. You just have to wait. And it's not like there's any grand story between each level. The intro tells us we're being invaded and here's a bestiary, that's all we're getting. There did not need to be 60 levels. Every single one of them is mandatory as well. Most feel repetitive, and again, each level gets longer and longer. I feel like this would be better if like half the levels were optional instead of required. I'm all for long games, I just don't like it when most of it feels like padding. That being said, the base gameplay by itself is likely the best of the series. Firstly, we again have the choice to pick between pullback or point and click, but this time if you choose the harder but intended pullback controls, you get bonus EXP with every kill. This is a pretty good way of pushing people to play the intended method, while at the same time keeping the simpler way of playing that some players might want. The environment can now have things we can use, like these fireworks that seem to grow from the ground like grass. Lighting them on fire sets them off and damages enemies. Arrows and their effects can now bounce off each other. There are subtypes within the arrows. Enemies have more weaknesses and immunities to work around, and they have pieces of armor that you can knock off. We now have mana, which opens up new build paths and allows certain attacks to have shorter cooldowns because they are now gatekept by a different system. There's a huge variety of enemies and it seems to be randomized for each level. Sometimes a golem super boss will just appear in like level 12 really early and you're just fucked. Castles and towers are back. We mostly fight on ground, and being put into a limited angle to shoot from can be kind of weakening, but it's cool to have around. There's a good amount of stuff to the core gameplay, roughly like 20 to 30 levels worth of stuff. Again, there are 60 total. I don't know, it feels padded out once you start playing for a while. You have fun at the moment, and then you realize this is going to keep going for like an hour, and that's just one level. I've played long games before. I play them because they have something that makes me want to for dozens of sittings. I feel that Winter Storm lacks that thing. This is still the type of game where you pick it up and play casually, not something you plan a week around. Maybe just make the level shorter? I don't want to spend an hour on one area, man. I will say that I do generally like it, and it is the last full game that Lost Vector / Jason Rainsvold would work on, but it's technically not his last game. Bowmaster Legacy. It's just a demo so far. Nobody has any animations, everyone just bounces. It's a singular level, but it's a perfect showcase of what a new age Bowmaster would have as gameplay. There's already a great amount of differing enemy types. We have a fair variety of arrows, but instead of choosing them, it's randomized into sets of 5, and it's called a quiver. The quiver is the only thing in this game that needs to reload. Enemies have more armor to knock off and can even raise their shields to block stuff. Avoiding friendly fire is a mechanic that's a lot more present in the gameplay. Injured people move slower and a lot of enemy projectiles can be shot out of the air. The chaos of the battlefield here is great. Its clear gameplay has been nailed down. It's very fun and quite frantic in a good way. The system of progression is not in this demo but was stated to be a roguelite, so I assume we're supposed to survive as long as we can, and when we fail, we get some resources to spend on meta progression. I see the vision. The randomized quiver has some potential here. Maybe one of the upgrades makes it so your preferred attacks appear more often, or are guaranteed to appear every 3 quivers or something. Here lies the outline of a great game, but I don't think it's likely to manifest. The last update was 2021, 5 years ago. Again, 2021 was 5 years ago. You know, half a decade. Jason Rainsvold is currently working at Netflix Games. Despite industry layoffs, his position seems stable. We don't have many updates, so maybe he's quietly working on Legacy as a side job, but that's clearly his business and not ours.